Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to my kitchen. I have just finished making a cup of coffee. It is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's Tuesday the 9th of February, I think. And anyways, I've had an insanely productive day and I'm still gonna get on with my marking this afternoon. So I just wanted to vlog a little bit of what I've been up to and talk to you guys a little bit about assessment for learning and how I tackle my marking, especially A-level biology. So let me just take you to my desk and let's catch up there. We've also had some snow in London and it's been so beautiful. I've been taking some daily walks. I went for an hour-long walk a little bit earlier today. I went for one yesterday. Just so picturesque and so beautiful, so it definitely helps to stay positive and to stay productive as well. So this is the desk situation right now. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I've tried really hard to keep the workspace tidy and organised, still using my laptop stand. On my last page of my bullet journal, I can't believe it. But yeah, let me update you on my to-do list. Yeah, so like I said, I'm literally on my last page, which is fairly sad, but this bullet journal has been well loved. And I am excited to move on to my new one, which is this one here. So I've ordered a customizable bullet journal, which I'm really excited to start after February half term. But my to-do list for today, I actually wrote a little mantra, if you wish, for the day called Insanely Productive Day, just to say that out loud. I think it helps to get me a bit more motivated and to give me a little bit more drive to get things done. But this is what it started off with. So I woke up gone 7 and I started working at 7:30. The reason for that was because I actually forgot to upload my lessons yesterday for Tuesday. Can't believe I forgot that, but I had essentially an hour to prep the lessons for my day. I didn't have any live lessons today, so all of these lessons were to be done remotely, and I had already planned almost a bit like an outline of them, so I just needed to finish that. Had a ton of emails to get back on. I prepped all of Wednesday's lessons, so I've got 2 live lessons tomorrow, and I used Nearpod, Google Jamboard and Pear Deck to prep those lessons. And in this one I used Educake, which is that quizzing website. You can check some of my previous vlogs if you want to see some behind the scenes on that. And then my main task for today is marking. I've got 3 A-level biology classes to mark. We are splitting the marking, so I've only got a handful of students to be marking for each of those classes, but to keep the momentum going, I wrote down their names so I can tick it off every time I mark it. And then these are things that I've just added onto my list today. So I did 2 lesson observations today and I gave some feedback to the teachers I observed. I also gave a chat to the Year 9 class, that is bottom set Year 9, just to explain to them the GCSE course and how it's organised for science and what the expectations are. And I shared some resources with them and with their parents. I then did a little bit of work on my MA. I've been blocked out of my email account and all of the dashboard information, so I needed to problem solve how to get into that so I could get my essay feedback and my presentation mark, which I was really happy about. And then obviously I've gone for a walk, so I just need to cross that off, and I need to call Fatima back just to have a quick chat with her as well. Personal jobs today, I wrote on a post-it note, so getting my laundry done, making a batch of soup, backing up my laptop, and then also filming a video, which I've already done as well. So that's my to-do list today. I think what's worked really well is having that mantra and also splitting all of these tasks into tiny little things, and the main task chunking that into smaller little things to keep the momentum going. I hope you're well though. I hope you're having a productive day or a productive week, and if you're not, don't worry too much about it. You'll find some energy within you to do it at some point in the near future. Anyways, I wanted to talk to you guys about the marking for A-levels. So to give you a little bit of, context, all of my students have done an informal assessment, so it's not anything that is going to be graded. It's not anything that is going to be recorded in terms of, being an actual grade or, number of marks that is going to inform a predicted grade or a report or to be given in parents, feedback, parents' evening feedback. This is just an informal assessment to give an opportunity so that students can get some feedback. So what I did a couple of weeks ago was I had a bit of a think in terms of what were the questions that I wanted my students to be doing. And from my previous experience teaching my A-level students, I know that there are two main things that they find difficult. The first is practical skills, investigations in terms of answering exam questions to do with the methodology, to do with the equipment, to evaluate, to conclude, all of the details around practical skills. But then also the second skill is just with that extended writing and applying their knowledge into a written format. Now, luckily, most of my students are actually fairly confident with the retrieval and the recall of information. Some of them, by all means, they still make some silly mistakes and sometimes I need to, tell them off. But I think for the most part, that retrieval is there because we embed it in our schemes of work all of the time. So for me, this informal assessment was really an opportunity to try to see what is the feedback I can give to my students that is going to be meaningful to them in terms of the areas that they're weaker at. So in terms of their practical skills and their extended writing. So the way that I set it up is I obviously made an assessment from the Exam Builder website actually, because I use that website for the OCR specification for biology, put together a paper for year 12, another one for year 13, and that generally takes me about 20 minutes each paper, but in total doing all of the admin it's about an hour for both of those year groups. And then I made sure that on Google Classroom I set this as an assignment that makes a copy for each student. So then what the students can do is that they can write all of their answers straight onto the document and it saves automatically, and then I'm able to access that document and then write my own feedback on it. That is then going to allow the students to not only see their original answers and the questions, but then also my own feedback, and then they can do their own dirt on it. Now, if you don't know what dirt means, it essentially means dedicate, I'm trying to remember actually, D-I-R-T, dedicated improvement and reflection time. It's actually just giving your students, some time to improve their work and to reflect on what their strengths and their weaknesses are, and maybe to get them to come up with some targets that they can improve, whatever the skill set or the knowledge is from that particular piece of work for them to improve on in the future. So the main thing really with this informal assessment and the marking that I'm going to do is, yes, I'm still going to mark this as if it were a formal piece of work. I'm still going to go through each and every single question using the mark scheme. And then the main thing that I'm going to be doing is at the end of the paper, I'm going to write a quick summary. So not only give them the total number of marks that they got, but no grade, so there are no grade boundaries, but I'm mostly going to be focusing on giving them actual written feedback that can be useful for them. So I'm going to do that in the format of what went well and EBI, so even better if. And I'm going to aim to have 2 or 3 targets that are really specific, that they can then have that as almost to-do lists for them to work on from now until the next assessment that they have. And then hopefully they can collate some evidence of things that they've been doing to revise, to improve that skill or that knowledge. And then hopefully I should see that impact in the future. Now, if you are training to be a teacher, or if you're new to teaching and you're still collating some evidence, this is a really good example of something that is a really solid piece of evidence. So you can have an example of the piece of work that the student submitted to you originally. You can then have the piece of feedback that you gave them, or some of the actions or support that you've put in place to get them to improve. And then you can have, as a third little nugget that is going to make that a really valuable piece of information and evidence, is the work that they have then produced after that said strategy or action that you've put in place. And I think that's such a really great way to collate some evidence for you as a teacher to show how you are getting students to progress, but also your subject knowledge, because you wouldn't be able to do this if you didn't have a confident command of what is the skill and the knowledge that students need to get better at doing. But also your planning, also your differentiation, if you can compare how the strategies that you've put in place is different for 2 or 3 students. The options are endless of how you can use this as evidence. So I'm hoping that's useful for you. Let me just quickly show you how it looks over on Google Classroom. Okay, I'm just being really mindful of not showing you any of my students' name, obviously to keep their information private, but you can see on Google Classroom that I've got a mark out of 30 that I will just write and then return to them. That's how long the assessment is, and then the Google Doc that I shared with them had the questions, and they are just going to write down their answers on that one. That's what I'm going to press, and then I will be able to edit that, which I'll show you next. Okay, here you go. Here's an example of a couple of documents. So this is from one student, I will obviously change the color of this so that I can actually mark it. And then this is of another student, so that I can just type straight onto this document. So I'm just going to get on with all of this. I will let you know how long it's taken me, and I will also then show you some of the feedback and give you a little bit of a reflection of how I will then plan the dirt lesson as well. Another quick thing I did just want to quickly mention is, you know, if you're new to teaching, what this whole marking thing is. When we're talking about assessment, one of the key things that we talk about in assessment is assessment for learning and assessment of learning. And this is an example of assessment of learning. So it is summative because there is a numerical value at the end. So we can, you know, quantify exactly how much learning has been made, what is the progress that the students have made. That being said, it doesn't mean that this can't be used as an opportunity to do assessment for learning. And essentially what the for learning means is that it is going to be formative. It is going to inform future lessons. And so the main difference here really is that I am doing this informal summative assessment of their learning thus far to then get them to reflect and give them some feedback so that it can inform their learning for the future, but it can also inform my planning for the future. So the main thing with assessment is trying to combine both types of assessment, for and of, so that they can work really, really well together to maximize the potential that can come from the different types and different styles of getting assessment done with your students. Anyway, if you want me to make a few videos talking you guys through some advice and strategies of assessment for learning, let me know in the comment section down below. But yeah, let me just start with my marking now, and I will give you guys a time lapse and then I'll report back. See you guys soon. Also just wanted to quickly mention that how I try to get into a zone of hyper focus, which is really, really important for marking, because you know, you don't want to get distracted and interrupted when you're doing a big task like marking, which requires a lot of your mental energy and focus. So a few things that I do is I open a new window browser so that I don't have any of the other tabs updating or reminding me of other things I want to do or distracting me. So that's number one. And then in terms of getting the pieces of work marked for all of my students, I will actually open a tab for all of the ones that I have to do. So for example, for one of my year 12 classes, I'm going to open a tab for each individual student that I have to mark. And then that way, that is my to-do list. The tab is my to-do list. And so each time I finish one, I close the tab, then I do another, I close the tab, and that can give me a real sense of pace and a sense of urgency to get as much of them done as quickly as I can, but without compromising the quality of the marking. The other thing that I like to do is to switch my phone onto airplane mode so that I don't get notifications and I don't get interrupted. And I also like to set on a timer, and I think having the timer there is not only going to motivate me to work a little bit faster because there's just this innate sense of like competition, but also it's just going to help me realize how long it's taking me to mark, and I can then use that information in the future to just help me plan my to-do list a little bit better, to plan my time, because then I know, well, each paper took me this many minutes to mark, so then next time I need to schedule this many hours instead of what I did this time. And it just helps manage my expectations because I'm someone that gets a little bit frustrated if I don't get through things. So timing myself helps me just reevaluate those expectations and know exactly how long things should take me. Hi, it's actually the next day. So I ended up marking last night for, I think it was about 2.5 to 3 hours. I got all of the year 12 marking done. And then this morning I managed to finish my year 13 marking in about 45 minutes to an hour. So it feels really good to be in a place where I finished all of that marking. And I've also actually prepped the dirt lessons today, and I've already delivered the dirt lesson to year 12 to one of my classes and the year 13 to another class. So I thought I would just show you how I've prepped those dirt lessons, how my students found them, and just to talk you through a little bit of my thought process as well. One of the things I did want to mention is how long it took me to mark each paper. I think it's really interesting to monitor that, and I think it's always useful to use a timer. So obviously the first few papers took me a lot longer to mark than the last papers, because after you mark a few, you end up knowing the mark scheme fairly off by heart. So I think that's one of the things just to bear in mind, is even if you've got like 10 or 20 papers to mark, however long it takes you to mark the first one isn't necessarily how long it's going to take you to mark the last one. So you do get quicker. So I would say just mark about 5 and then you'll build up that speed. So I definitely found that, and it didn't take me too long. So let me just show you how it all went here on my computer. So this is how the marking of a paper looked like. So just went through it and just added the marks and any comments, and then at the end I just write down some feedback, the total number of marks, what went well, and EBIs, so even better ifs. And then every student has this, and then they can edit and they can dirt their own paper as well. So this is the example of the dirt lesson that I made on Google Slides using Pear Deck as an add-on, so that students can interact and they can type and drag things on the slides. So I started off the lesson by getting students to just go back over that feedback, write down their initial thoughts, what went well, even better ifs, but to mostly set a target for themselves. So in today's lesson that worked really well, because I could see that students were taking that time to look at the feedback. I think it's always tempting to get students to do that before the lesson or even after, but it never guarantees that they will. So to make sure that the time spent marking and writing their feedback has been useful, I like to carve time in the lesson to actually get the students to do that. So when they were writing in the box, that was my confirmation that they had seen it. I then gave the class just some general feedback. So generally how the class did. I got them to reflect on things that we had done previously to improve on these areas that we now saw those results. So we now had these areas as what went well, and I think that was really important to recognize that all of the efforts that we've been making have paid off. And then in terms of the EBIs, I then structured the lesson to go through each one of these points by having a specific task. So for example, with this task, what I did was I copied down 4 answers of different students, and they have a range of different mark points, and I wanted students to drag that icon to which one was the better answer. And it was interesting to see how they were thinking about each of these answers. But this, I got such good feedback. Students love to see what other people wrote, and they also like to see what my thinking was. So they liked the fact that I compared answer number 2 and answer number 3, that even though both got 2 marks, why one was better than the other. And what I could also do is I put this on teacher-led mode, and so I shared my screen, and then there's an option to show the responses, and the class can see where most people put their icon on. And I think that worked really well because they could see what other people were thinking without showing anyone's name. So this worked very well. And then this first answer, I just copied it onto the next slide, and I got my students to write down what improvements they would make. So we looked at analysing the answer, how we could just change a few keywords to then get that from 0 to 2 marks. And that was very useful to do as well. I then spoke through, so I did a bit of modelling on how I would tackle this question, gave a bit of feedback. I showed them a way to structure their answer, and then they had a go in the next slide. So then they actually applied what I had modelled to them in this context here. I think it's important to provide an extension because some people are going to naturally get it faster than others. So instead of them waiting for me to move on, they've got something else there to be thinking about. So I put that in. I then moved on to a little bit more modelling. So I looked at how I would analyse this answer, and I gave them some feedback on why what they had mostly said was not correct. And then we spoke about why, you know, using the mark scheme, why that mark scheme is the way that it is. So I gave them a little bit of an explanation using some visuals. So this is dual coding. This is an example of where you've got an image with an explanation that they can then associate that in the future. I finished off the lesson by looking at exam technique, where I actually ended up using Jamboard. So I copy pasted this onto Jamboard, and we obviously read the question in detail, but then what I did was I showed them how I would analyze this exam question. So it's a 4-mark question, and they find that fairly overwhelming because they don't know what the mark points would be. So I just quickly showed them how I know, without looking at a mark scheme, how do I know what will be on that mark scheme. So we analyzed the results. I color coded it so that they could see the thought process. So these were the command words. These were the context of the question. And then in blue are my mark points in response to that context. So I think that was really interesting to get them to see the breakdown of that thought process, and they found that incredibly useful. After I did this modeling, I got them to actually write down their own answers. So this took them a good 5-6 minutes to do in the lesson, and I was giving them live feedback. So I would show my answers again, I would show the answers so everyone could see it. Didn't have any names, but I was just giving feedback, and then I could see people editing their answer because they knew it was applicable to them. And that was so useful. Again, I gave a little extension here at the bottom for anyone who was finishing a little bit sooner, and then we actually looked at the mark scheme and we confirmed what we had thought. And then I finished things off by giving them tasks. So they had to dirt their paper using the mark scheme, and then I gave them some additional practice questions which I just put together on Exam Builder, and then they did some of those exam questions depending on their needs. So yeah, I think that went really well. For year 13, I did a similar structure, so I won't show you that, but these are some examples of how you could do a dirt lesson if you're looking for some ideas as well. Anyways, that is it for today's video. I hope you found it really useful and interesting to see how I do my marking, how I give feedback, how I prep lessons, and also a little bit more about assessment for learning. I will see you guys next week in another video, but for now, just have a wonderful day and I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.